80th pasuk, 80th verse of Psalm 119. And David HaMelech says, Yehi libi samim. He's speaking to God. It's like a prayer. And he says, may my heart be complete, b'chukecha, in your statutes, l'man le'evesh, so that I will not be shamed or embarrassed. What? My heart should be whole in your statutes. What does wholeheartedness have to do with statutes? If David HaMelech wants wholeheartedness, he should say, Yehi libi samim. My heart should be whole. Number one. Why is the b'chukecha? Number two, l'man lo yevesh. Why should I be wholehearted? Which is like sincere, to be real, to be genuine. Why? Oh, there's a reason for that. L'man lo yevesh. That in and of itself is not genuine. If I'm only trying to be wholehearted so that I won't be ashamed or embarrassed, that's not wholeheartedness. Wholeheartedness is the opposite. Wholeheartedness is sincerity. Wholeheartedness is I'm not looking to avoid a pitfall or achieve some kind of reward. So this pasuk has to be understood. Very interestingly, Rashi does not comment at all, which could lead us to presume that Rashi has already addressed this issue at length previously, if not in this book, in other books. And that actually is going to be my suggestion, that Rashi talks about tmimus, the idea of completeness in the sense of wholeheartedness. Rashi already talks about this in the Chumash, and because he already talks about it in the Chumash, that's why he does not explain it in the book of Tehillim. But we have to get there. So let's take a look into the Rishonim and see how they interpret this verse. The Ibn Ezra seems to address this very question of what does L'man le'evesh have to do with the request or the entreaty, Yehi libi samim, David HaMelech expressing the hope that his heart will be whole. Ibn Ezra says like this. This is a continuation. If you take a look back in verse 78, David HaMelech says that the wanton sinners, those brazen individuals, should be shamed and embarrassed. Why should they be shamed and embarrassed? Ki sheker ivsuni, for they malign me with lies. And my response is, Ani asir b'fukudecha, and I will speak about your statutes, as we explained in our previous class. So Ibn Ezra says, just as David HaMelech asked that Yeveshu Zaydim, so the other side of this is they should be embarrassed, and I shouldn't be embarrassed. Yehi libi samim l'man le'yevesh. And that's why hispalel sheyazrehu Hashem, that God should help him, lihiyos libi samim v'lo yevesh v'pnei hazeidim, and then he won't be embarrassed in front of them. They should be embarrassed because they have maligned him, but he should not be embarrassed before them because his heart is wholehearted. So, number one, why is that the thing that's going to make sure that David HaMelech won't be ashamed? And most people are probably more ashamed of what they do than their lack of wholeheartedness. In other words, if I behaved inappropriately, it's much more embarrassing than if I did all the right things and maybe I wasn't sincere about it. So I wasn't wholehearted, so I did it capriciously, so I had a reason, so I had an act. Okay, at least I did the right thing. It's much more embarrassing to do the wrong thing. So if David HaMelech is worried about being embarrassed, why doesn't he say, I should be perfect. I should be complete. I should be complete would include everything, from inside out, from what radiates from the heart and the mind, inclusive of David HaMelech's actions. He doesn't say that though. He says, no, Yehi libi samim. My heart should be whole. My heart. And then, l'man le'evesh. When it came to the shame of Yeveshu Zaydim, David HaMelech didn't say, Yeveshu Zaydim ki libam sheker. He didn't say, let them be shamed for their hearts are lies. He said, Yeveshu Zaydim, let them be shamed ki sheker ivsuni. Because of what they did to me. Because they maligned me with lies. Because they accused me. Because they bullied me. Because they try to denigrate me. And ruin my name and reputation. So that's something they did. It wasn't a question of wholeheartedness. David HaMelech didn't say, Yeveshu Zaydim, because when they come with their sickly sweet smiles, they're actually not thinking about my good and they're trying to harm me. maybe then we would say, okay, so he worried about the lack of sincerity, the disingenuous nature of his enemies. They said, let them be embarrassed of the disingenuousness, of their deceitful approach. But he didn't say that. So this is why I ask when I learned the Ibn Ezra, so what's the connection? And a bigger question is, what is wholeheartedness exactly? What does that mean? Wholeheartedness as opposed to brokenheartedness? Tomim means complete or whole. What is David HaMelech asking for exactly?
Without hesitation.
Without hesitation?
That, he should do something like wholehearted.
Is that work for you?
Like
Okay, well, I'm not dismissing it. Let's leave that on the table. Maybe it means without hesitation. Maybe, I don't know. Without doubt, maybe. One thing is certain: Ibn Ezra doesn't tell us what it means, right? He leaves that for us to figure out. We'll take a look in the Radak. Rabbeinu David Kimchi says, "Yehi libi." He kind of reviews almost the same approach as Ibn Ezra. He adds a word. He says, "Hazeidim yeveshu." He reverses it. Earlier we learned that the wanton sinners, they will be ashamed. Aval ani lo yevesh. I won't be ashamed. Va'azruni, God should help me. Shehei libi tamim v'shalem b'chokecha. That my heart should be whole, perfect in your statutes. V'zeh lo yevesh. And that's going to make sure I won't be embarrassed. So he didn't really tell us what wholeheartedness means. And he also didn't tell us why. The way I'm not going to be embarrassed of the Zaydim, who David HaMelech hopes will be embarrassed. In fact, he prays they're going to be embarrassed. He expresses the wish that they should be embarrassed because they maligned him, deceitfully and disingenuously harming him. So because of their dishonesty, and because of their defamation, and because of their vilification, they should be ashamed. But I shouldn't be ashamed. Why? Because libi samim, because my heart will be whole, because it'll be sholem, it'll be complete, intact. How does intact or completeness of heart ensure that lo yevesh? And why is that, if you will, the flip side of yeveshu zaydim, let them be ashamed, but I won't be ashamed? The Metzudas David says something very interesting. And then I think we're going to go back to our sages to try to figure out where the Rishonim were coming from. The Metzudas David says, Tamim, he's the first one of the classic Mefarshim to actually explain the word Tamim. Everybody else didn't really explain it whole. He says this means bekavana hegoina. This means with the appropriate intentions. What's appropriate intentions? The appropriate intention is lishma. Lishma. That means to do something for its sake. So if I do something, but not because I'm doing it for its sake, I'm doing something because it leads to something else, then I'm not really sincere about what I'm doing. I'm doing this for a reason or a purpose. David HaMelech is asking that his avodas Hashem, his service to God, should be not just without hesitation, but it should be entirely focused. Meaning, serving God should not be a means to an end. For example,
And not a reward.
when it could be not even just a reward. It could be, if I serve God because I don't want people to laugh at me, for example. I created a certain image and I want to maintain that image. It's for my self-aggrandizement. I want to look good. I want to impress people. Is that sincerity? No, certainly not sincere. It's not being sincere. If I'm trying to impress somebody, it's not sincere. Certainly if I'm looking just for a reward, it's also not sincere. If somebody's nice to you because they want something from you, is that sincere? No. A lot of rich people feel they have no real friends. Maybe they don't. Why are people nice to them? Because they want something from them. That's why a lot of times rich people, they hobnob with rich people. One reason is because they're snobby. Another reason is because people don't want something from them. And it's very uncomfortable when somebody comes and says, oh, here you go. You want something from me. You're not sincere. You don't really care about me. You care about my pocketbook. So they don't like that. It's understandable. It's understandable. This is what we call the occupational hazard sometimes of success, that people want something from you. They're not really sincere when they come along and offer help or assistance. By and large, many of the things that many people do, or even most people do, oftentimes are not 100% sincere, and there's levels of sincerity. Which is I suppose, okay. It is what it is. How should we serve Hashem? We should try to rise in our sincerity, from level to level, be more and more sincere, kavana hagoina and lishma. But I'm going to ask you a simple question. Why is that the object of shame or not? So David HaMelech says, I don't want to be shamed, so I want to be sincere with God. It would seem to me that shame is something that I experience or feel before other people. You know, when the Torah talks to us about damages that a person might inflict on another, so there's indemnification that has to be made. And what kind of indemnification? So if you look in the specifics, there's 5 kinds of indemnification. There's the damages you made, there's the pain that was inflicted, there's the fact that somebody may have lost the opportunity to work and to earn money, so you have to make up for money lost. They have now doctor's bills. And then something called boishas. Shame, embarrassment. And in boishas really has 2 qualifying factors. Number 1, the circumstances, like who are you and who are they? So if somebody who is a very honorable person smacks you in public, it's less embarrassing than somebody who's a street urchin smacks you in public. So it's the fi hamavayish v'hamizbayish, it says. Who got smacked? A person who has no self-dignity or no self-worth to begin with? A person who walks around half naked and begs for money anyway? They don't have so much dignity, but a person who lives a very dignified life would be even more embarrassed or shamed by that assault. And then another thing is, who saw it? Did anybody else see it? If nobody was there, nobody saw it, is there really any shame? It's like that famous age-old question. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody took a picture and posted it on Facebook, it would actually happen. That's a joke. But the point would be that shame has a lot to do with what others might see. I'm embarrassed in front of others. But this is not visible to others at all. Sincerity of heart? Who knows? Elikim yireh levav. Only God sees what's in the heart. So if I was worried about shame, being ashamed in front of Hashem, well, what does that have to do with Yeveshu Zaydim? Did David HaMelech mean they should be ashamed of Hashem? I don't think it means they should be ashamed of themselves. Ashamed of themselves because they maligned me falsely, deceitfully. Let them be ashamed of themselves. When you accuse somebody of things they never did, and then everybody finds out that you lied and cheated all the way, you feel like a fool. And you should. You did something wrong. So David HaMelech says, Yeveshu Zaydim, let them be ashamed. I don't want to be ashamed. Why? Because I'm going to be wholehearted. And who will know the difference?
You will. You will.
You will? So David HaMelech just meant they should be ashamed of themselves, and he said, I don't want to be ashamed of myself?
If he knew that he did the right thing, then he couldn't.
If he knew he did the right thing. But he wasn't sure he did it wholeheartedly. But he still knew he did the right thing. Is it embarrassing? I'm so embarrassed. I did a mitzvah this morning. Why are you embarrassed? Well, I wasn't 100% sincere about it. I did it part robotically, part just because that's what I do, or I couldn't imagine doing it any other way. And also, I was happy that people saw me do this mitzvah. I felt good about myself. It's a lot less shameful than doing the wrong thing. Person's not ashamed. I'm ashamed I was kind to somebody, but I didn't do it with 100% sincerity. On some level, a person could be ashamed by it, but that's not the first mark or stain of shame is not lack of integrity. The real stain of shame is doing the wrong thing. David HaMelech says they should be ashamed. I shouldn't be ashamed. Why? That's why I should be Yehi Libi Samim. Of all things, it would seem that's at the end of the totem pole, not the beginning. So I guess confusing you, but really I'm trying to understand this myself. Look, what is going on here? Mitzudas David is giving me this business of intentions, and I'm trying to understand how that works intention-wise. So let's take a look now. Let's go back to the words of our sages. Let's start off with Medrash Tehillim, because that's the words of our sages, which are, as they say, right here. The Medrash Tehillim says like this. Yeshuvu liyirecha, he continues verse 79, he says, Yehi Libi Samim. Omar lei, David said, Kedera sha'achalti ba'chulin le'achalti ba'kodshim. Utensils or vessels in which I ate mundane, ordinary food should not be the same vessel in which I would eat something which is of a sacred nature. So of course this goes back to temple times. and food which is called kachim. For example, a kohen would eat food which is from a korban, from an offering to Hashem. And sometimes ordinary Jewish people would bring an offering, and they would have kachim. And when you eat kachim, when you eat something which is of sacred nature, it's based on Migdash oriented, it requires a higher level of ritual purity. Higher level of ritual purity, so you can't just use the same utensils or vessels. Clearly this is being said euphemistically. Laman shalo'eya mizbayish, so they won't be embarrassed. Okay, this is not exactly what we're talking about, but if you sit down at a fancy dinner with French service to the nines, and you don't know which glass to use for what, you use the wrong fork or the wrong spoon, you may be embarrassed. If everybody else is posh high society, they know exactly what they're doing, and they have all the etiquette figured out, and you sit down and you feel like a country bumpkin because you use the water glass for the wine, and then you use the dessert spoon for the soup, and everybody's looking at you like, who's this idiot? What are they doing at this fancy dinner? It's not an exact example, but like you're using things for kudshim when it's supposed to, mundane is mundane, ordinary is ordinary. You know, French fries and hamburgers, it's not exactly, I don't know how to pronounce all those words, all those fancy menus. And so David HaMelech seems to say that my heart should not be a repository for kind of conflicting feelings which are less than honest, less than sincere, and real sincerity. In other words, he wants to reserve his heart for only the loftiest of feelings. And that's the meaning, says the Medrash Tehillim, of libi cholo bekirbi. My heart is empty within me. What does it mean, empty within me? It means there's no Yetzer Hara. Why? Ki haroge b'tainus. So David HaMelech didn't have what most of us have in our hearts, a Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara, a duplay. We have two very different kinds of realities dwelling in the same heart, each one vying for control. But David HaMelech emptied out the tenant. He booted the bad tenant, and he took control of the house. It's only the Yetzer Tov. And then it says, Yehi libi samim b'chukecha. And it says, Leiv tohar barali alikim. So the Medrash Tehillim seems to understand this as like a seamless continuation. Libi chol b'kirbi is from chapter 109 of Tehillim. And this is chapter 119. And then we have this idea of Leiv tohar barali alikim. God should help create for me a pure heart. What does pure mean? Even in English? That there's nothing else in there. So pure olive oil is supposedly pure olive oil. Unless it has a kosher sign, it probably isn't pure olive oil, because in Canada you can get away with putting 2% of foreign substances, you could still call pure, which by the way is less than batel b'shishim, less than 60 times the volume. And therefore, for all you know, when you buy 100% pure olive oil, it could be only 98% olive oil and 2% lard, which would be a problem. And that's why when it comes to buying olive oil, whether it's for your frying pan or your menorah, you have to make sure that there's a kosher sign on it, which doesn't mean it's pure olive oil, but at least the 2% isn't lard. The 2% would be something else. Right? It's just a little piece of consumer information. I don't think Canada is unique in this. I think, by the way, the United States is like that also. At any rate, but pure means pure, like unadulterated, really. So, leiv tahar, a pure heart, means unadulterated. So, halev hu shemavayish asa adam. The heart is a person's embarrassed. Like you said, embarrassed of yourself. Lamashi yedea ma'asa v'halev hu sameach. You know what you really did. You know if you did it sincerely. You know in your heart. Sometimes we can even convince ourselves things in our minds. But in your heart you know. You know if this is a real deal. You know if you're sincere. You know. And that's why David HaMelech says in the 4th Psalm, Nasata simcha b'libi, you place joy in my heart. The upshot of all this says the Medrash Tehillim, Lachein Amar David. That's why David HaMelech says, Yehi libi, my heart should be samim. My heart should be whole. Where? B'chukecha. Doesn't explain that. David, as David asked, Hashem actually gave him, and that's what the meaning of Ani bitumi tomachti bi. I, in my sincerity, in my wholesomeness, you supported me, and therefore, lo yevish. I'm not going to be embarrassed. So, what the Medrash Tehillim has certainly done for us is focus this onto the heart, the meaning of being in the heart. and not having conflicting desires, lusts, cravings, emotions, yearnings in the heart, where the heart wants one thing and the heart wants something else. David HaMelech wanted to be wholehearted, which means in his heart, he wanted one thing, that I should be single-minded or single-hearted. Not minded, but single-hearted. His heart, his emotion, should be drawn only to the service of Hashem. What leaves to be understood is what that has to do with embarrassment or shame, and why does it show up here? It doesn't really explain how it follows why they shouldn't be embarrassed. So let me introduce you to a Medrash Rabbah in the book of Shemot, Medrash Rabbah in the second book of Torah, and this Medrash Rabbah, which is in Parshas Boi, which is the third parsha in the second book, which speaks about many things, including the Korban Pesach, the Passover offering. So in the second part of the 19th parsha of the Medrash Rabbah, the Medrash Rabbah says the following. Zois chukas ha-pasach. The Torah says this is the statute of the Paschal offering. Says the Medrash. This is the meaning of the verse in Psalm 119, verse 80. Yehi libi sam b'chukecha. How is Zois chukas ha-pasach, this is the statute of the Paschal offering, how is that, may my heart be whole in your statutes? That's the implicit question the Medrash is asking. So the Medrash explains. Omar David, King David said, Rabbeinu ha'olam, Master of the universe, Kishani eiseg b'chukecha, when I engage in the kind of mitzvahs that are called statutes, which are different than mitzvahs called edut or mishpatim, like laws, testimonial ordinances. Because laws and ordinances or testimonials are things which I can understand or relate to. It brings to mind something that happened. It commemorates an event. Eat matzah because you left Pesach eating matzah. Okay, fine. Okay. Put a mezuzah on your door and then you'll see it on the way in and on the way out. It'll bring mindfulness. Okay. I get that. Bring a korban. Why do I have to bring a korban? And then, of course, there's chukim that are even stranger to us than taking an animal, killing it, and burning half of it, like the red heifer, which makes no sense to us. So David HaMelech says, when I involve myself in chukim, lo yehei reshus liyetzahara lahotzitz bi. David HaMelech says, what I'm asking is no trespassing. I don't want to hear from the Yetzirah. I don't want to hear him come along and say, what are you, an idiot? You're doing what? Who does that? Why would you do it anyway? Come on, like I understand logical things, rational things, things that enrich your life. This is ridiculous. It makes no sense. Sometimes we have to deal with the Yetzirah. We're doing things and the Yetzirah says, what are you doing? You're an enlightened person. You're living in the 21st century. You're smarter than that. So David HaMelech says, this is what I ask. And that's the meaning of David HaMelech's request in Psalm 86. Clearly, that the request King David makes here is replete with other verses. There's kind of a lot of crossover. There's a lot of common themes. You see it from the Medrash Tehillim, and now you see it from the Medrash Rabbah. Horeini Hashem darkecha. God, show me your way. Ahalul b'amitecha. Let me walk in your truth. What does this mean? The Medrash here explains, Shalayita isi Yetzirah. Let the Yetzirah not twist me, not trick me, not turn me aside. And then I'll be ashamed of those who are truly righteous. Rashi says like this, the Eitz Yosef in his commentary. He says, I'm afraid that I'll start to look for reasons. People have active minds. We start rationalizing things. And he says, if I do that, someday I'll be embarrassed in front of the tzaddikim. They'll look at me and say, that's why you did this? Because you created this counterfeit reason? This worked for you? Like doing it because Hashem said wasn't good enough? You had to create a silly narrative? David HaMelech says, I don't even want my head to work that way. I don't want to come up with reasons. And furthermore, he says, if the Yetzirah is going to come along and twist me and turn me, I may end up not following the words of the Torah fully. And then people who are even inferior scholars, inferior neshamas, they'll look at me and they say, what are you doing? You? David HaMelech? Vani mizbayish, he says. I'm going to be embarrassed. So therefore the Medrash says, Aseh libi echad. Make my heart one. What does it mean my heart one? She'eh esik b'Torah b'tamos. That I should It should engage yourself in your Torah with intactness, perfectness. Tmimus, wholesomeness, that's all. And then I'll have libi tamim, and then zlaman lo yevish, then I won't be embarrassed. In other words, what is the Medrash telling us? The Medrash is telling us that what David HaMelech sought was to root out doubt from his heart. There's niggling doubts that say, why would you do this? This doesn't make any sense. I get the parts that are logical, that have rhyme and reason, but this doesn't make any sense. Forget about it. Let it go. So David HaMelech said, I don't want to have those niggling doubts. I want them removed. I want to be absolutely wholesome with Hashem. As the Eitz Yosef says, what does it mean, Hi libi echad? This is the meaning of Yached levavi liyira es shemecha. Make my heart one in the singular focus of to revere you. Because really, the Shnei Levavis, what's the two hearts of a person? Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. I don't want that, he says. I want it all one. All one. Shehei tam betmimus, that I should be entirely intact and focused, and then I won't be embarrassed. And this is what he prayed for. He prayed, says the Eitz Yosef, shehispalel shalibe yishalem b'chol achukim. That when should he not have doubts? When he's doing Eidos and Mishpatim, he didn't have doubts. It made sense to him. It made sense to him. He was involved. He was engaged. He related. He connected. But when he did the Chukim, this is when he was most afraid. And the Eitz Yosef says he's most afraid because a Chukah, a statute, is not supposed to be performed with rhyme and reason. But he was afraid maybe he would insert rhyme and reason. And this would take away from the purity of the observance. And David HaMelech wanted to observe wholeheartedly, without any kind of doubt whatsoever. Because if there's a reason, then it could be a doubt. If there's a reason, maybe it's not a good reason. Maybe it's not a perfect reason. So therefore, he asks for wholeheartedness. Now, perhaps this medrash is the origin of the commentary of the Metzudas David, who says, B'chavona hagoyna, in the right intention. And obviously he's speaking specifically to Chukim. So the Malbim, I think the Malbim really bases himself on this medrash when he says that even though she'asiach b'fikudecha, I do speak in your statutes, in your instructions, that yesh behem tam, that there's a lot of rhyme and reason that's encoded into Torah. But nonetheless, there's the parts of Torah which we don't understand. And maybe yesh hirur, maybe I'm doubting, maybe I'm second guessing the chukim. And if ein libi tomim be'emuna shlema, if I don't have full, perfect faith, so maybe then I'll be embarrassed even to do this. And then people will come along and say, what are you doing? But if libi tamim, if my heart is whole, then I won't be embarrassed to do it. Won't be embarrassed. If I won't be embarrassed to do it, then I'll follow through and I'll do everything right. So we understand a little bit of what's going on over here. This has something to do with wholeheartedness. It has something to do with doing something without any doubts. The wicked people should be embarrassed because what they did was totally false. They bullied and vilified David, Sheketiv Sunni. They maligned him falsely. And David HaMelech is saying they should be ashamed of their falsity, of their lack of honesty and integrity. And conversely, I ask Hashem that my service to God should be of 100% integrity. And I should have full faith in Hashem. And because I have full faith in Hashem, I have no questions and no doubts. And because I have no questions and no doubts, I won't be embarrassed, man le'evish. To bring this all together, I would like to suggest where I began, that the reason Rashi doesn't say anything is because Rashi already has explained this. But before I go to Rashi, I'm just going to finish off with the words here, the teachings of the Teres Chesed, which is brought by the Ma'am Loyas. The Teres Chesed says, he says, what David HaMelech asked for, when he asked for a whole heart, is Shalayivgam Tselem Elikim Shabai. He said, every one of us has a godly spark, or more than that, an image, a gestalt, a godly gestalt. And David HaMelech said, I don't want that godly gestalt or image to be tarnished or to be compromised in any way, because that would bring me to busha. It's almost as if David HaMelech is alluding here to the notion of the wholehearted faith that every one of us is naturally endowed with, like the innocence of a child, that can easily be lost in the journey of life. And David HaMelech is trying to hold on to that. He's trying to retain that simple faith, that Tselem Elikim, that resonates and illuminates within the heart of every single child, David HaMelech wants to have that continue to fill his life with meaning and to elevate him. And therefore, when it's chukim she'ein lehem tam, al yivakesh taimim. I don't want you to look for reasons. I don't need reasons. Incidentally, David HaMelech, son Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of people, he looked for too many reasons when it came to chukim. And he understood almost all the chukim, except for certain ones, like the Paraduma. And because David HaMelech, Shlomo HaMelech understood all the things which aren't necessarily supposed to be understood, he reasoned the mitzvahs out of their fulfillment. He said, this mitzvah is because of this. I won't be guilty of that. I won't come to that. And the Rambam, even though he says whenever you can find reasons, use reasons, he says, remember that whatever reasons you find are only superficial. And there's always something that is far, far beyond what our mind can possibly grasp. So why should you look for reasons? So the Rebbe says, because then it becomes something I can relate to. Instead of setting my heart and mind aside and only following through in action, I should engage my heart and mind to the maximum I'm able to. But remember that it's not based on the foundation of heart and mind, but rather built on the foundation of pure faith and dedication to Hashem. So this is the notion of a yivakish time. He says I shouldn't look for reasons. Teres Chesed connects us to a natural innocence that every one of us has. The Shar Chaim says something very interesting. This is almost a little bit of a diversion, but he says it, so I'm going to share it. And then I'm going to go back to the idea of Tamim. He says that what we refer to here is intactness, meaning a perfect record, whole, to be whole. Although what he says doesn't seem to jibe so much with the Hilibi Samim, but he says, I should be Tamim. What does that mean? So oftentimes you'll have people who live lives which are righteous at times. Life's choppy. Maybe they had a colorful youth and they became very righteous when they got older or more mature. So you can't say, life's not, I don't have a perfect scorecard. I didn't do everything right all the time. David HaMelech says, I don't want in my older age to be ashamed of my youth, as most of us are. We look back and realize how foolish we were, how silly we were, how misguided we were. So David HaMelech says, I don't want to have to deal with that. And that's being said despite the fact that David HaMelech made some serious mistakes in his youth. Nonetheless, he says, Yi li bisamim, that I shouldn't have to be embarrassed in my youth. I suppose it means he should do tshuva in his youth, and don't wait until you're older to look back and say, now I know, or now I'm wiser. Get wise before you're naturally wise.
So he's quite old when he...
Is David HaMelech old when he writes these words?
With all this.
I don't know if he's old. And from the Shar Chaim, it would see he's not old. It seems he's still very young when he wrote this. He said, I don't want to get embarrassed when I'm old. He never lived to be that old anyway. He was only 70 years old. But it seems David HaMelech wrote this in his youth, if the Shar Chaim is right. Okay, but let's move on to where he started from. So, the word Tamim shows up multiple times in the actual Chumash. Yes? You all know this. It's not a Tehillim word. There are some words that only show up in Tehillim. But some words that you have to kind of review the entire Tanakh to find a similar word. But this word shows up multiple times in the Chumash itself. Where's the first time the word Tamim shows up? This is easy. It's the beginning of the second portion of the Torah. First portion of it is Bereshis. Second portion is Noach.
No.
What does the Torah say?
Ishtamim,
Eila told it Noach.
Ishtamim, Tzadik haya
Noach ish tzaddik.
Tzadik.
Tamim haya bedorotav. Noach was a righteous person. He was intact. He was perfect, complete. Just like that. What does Rashi say in Parshas Noach? Nothing. Why does he say nothing? Because it's obvious what this means. Noach was perfect. He did all the things he was supposed to do. He dotted every I, he crossed every T, he did all his mitzvahs. End of story. Now there was a Jew, the first Jew, who lived somewhat after Noach, 10 generations to be exact. His name was Avram. He was pretty perfect. But God said, Avram, you're not perfect yet. What was Avram Avinu missing? He was missing a mitzvah that he was destined to fulfill. But Noach was not destined to fulfill that mitzvah. What was that mitzvah? Bris Milah. What does Hashem say when he speaks to Avram Avinu? And he says, Avram, I want you to do this mitzvah. He said, Hishalech lefanai, walk before me, veheye, and you should be Tamim. So, the way the Mefarshim explained this, that the Bris Milah was in an area where Avraham Avinu did not have full mastery. The carnal urge was not fully yet mastered by Avraham Avinu. He had control of what he would listen to. He had control of where he would look. He had control of what he would say. He had control of his mind. But the carnal urge, he still didn't have control. Hashem says, now you'll have control over that too. In other words, there's a certain lack of completeness that Avraham had. And when Avraham did this mitzvah, which was not by adding something, but actually by removing something, he became whole. He became intact. He became perfect and complete. What does Rashi say on the words Hisalach lefanai v'hayei samim? About the word tamim, Rashi actually says nothing. Why? Because it's understood. Avraham Avinu was imperfect. It's true, Noach didn't do this mitzvah. Noach was also born without having a foreskin, but that's besides the point. Noach wasn't supposed to be a Yid. He was supposed to be a Noach. So Noach was perfect for who Noach is supposed to be. Avraham Avinu was supposed to be more than Noach is supposed to be. He was much more than Noach is supposed to be. Noach didn't influence others. Avraham Avinu brought a tsunami of positive influence in the world. But God said, you're still not perfect. You're still not intact and complete. There's still something you're missing, namely Brit Milah. Rashi says, nothing. Why? Because Rashi doesn't just say things. If it's obvious that this means you're still missing something, then that's the meaning of Tamim, to be complete. For that matter, the word Tamim shows up multiple times in the book of Leviticus. And what does it mean when it shows up in the book of Leviticus, which opens with a discussion of offerings in the Beit HaMikdash, Korbanot? Se Tamim, a perfect animal, a yearling sheep. What does it mean, a perfect sheep or goat? It means when you bring a korban, don't bring a blemished animal. Blemish-free. And there was lack of perfect animals that were being brought initially as offerings in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash. And that's why Malachi, right in the beginning of his prophecies, he rails about the lack of perfect service. He says, you bring emaciated animals, you bring animals that are imperfect, that's what you bring as a korban? He says, would you do such a thing? If you had to bring somebody to your governor, if you had to bring somebody to a magistrate, a ruler of flesh and blood, would you bring him something imperfect or would you bring a perfect specimen? So when it comes to God, you bring imperfect things? Nowhere in the entirety of Leviticus does Rashi explain the meaning of Tamim. It's self-understood. The Torah is explicit. The Torah says you're not allowed to bring an animal, which is saruah, a kolot. Animals that have various blemishes, you're not allowed to bring that. Tamus, it has to be perfect. That's it. Rashi doesn't explain it. Where does Rashi explain the word Tamim? He does explain it, but he explains it only in the book of Deuteronomy. In the 18th chapter of Sefer Dvarim, over there, the Torah talks about various forms of divination, of worshipping alien gods, deities, shamans, spirits, and alternate forms of spirituality and spiritual consciousness, and becoming aware of the future. And there, after the Torah tells you shouldn't do all these things, the Torah says in verse 13, Tamim tia im Hashem elikecha. You should be perfect with Hashem your God. Incidentally, the vast majority of the Mefarshim, for example, Nachmanides, right, Ramban, Ibn Ezra, Chizkuni, Sefarno, even the Achronim like Orach Chaim, they all explain this in the manner of, don't be deficient. Don't be deficient. Serve God fully. Don't have weak areas. I serve God, but when it comes to faith, I'm not so faithful. That's not perfect. Then I'm perfect in my actions, I'm not perfect in my faith. Your faith has to be perfect. Rambam, in the book, in the first book of Mishnah Torah, which is called the book of Mada, in the halacha is called Avodah Zarah, the Rambam talks about, he said, anybody who believes in the spirit, in alien forms of spirituality is a fool, Rambam says. If you think that actually makes a difference, if you think tarot cards and Ouija boards work, you're a fool. That's what Rambam says. He says, you're chasei hadas, you're feeble-minded. He says, only people who believe this are dumbbells. People who are uneducated. Rambam is very sharp about this. Ramban doesn't necessarily agree, by the way, but Rambam is very sharp. He says, ein daitan shlema. They don't have their wits together. They don't have clarity. If you had clarity, he says, you wouldn't think that. Bale hachachma, people who are wise. Tamimei hadas, people who are whole in their attitude for life, who have a solid grounding and a really settled perspective. Yodo, berayes, beruris, they know that all these things are baloney. Kalelo advaram shasatera elon divrei chachma, they're not wise, they're toyu, they're chaotic, they're empty, and it's only something that a person who can get suckered into would follow. That's what he says. And he says, that's what the Torah means. Tomim tiyim havaya lekecha. You should be perfect with God, meaning don't be feeble-minded. Not only don't be weak, not only don't be deficient, not only don't be lacking. When it comes to your actions, he says, when it comes to your attitudes, you should have it all together. You should be whole, intact, perfect. Attitudinally, in your consciousness, your faith, I suppose. You should be whole. A balanced person, a wholesome person. Solid. So in other words, the Rambam says that Tomim Tiyah is talking about B'deya. I shouldn't have a deficient, a weak mind. So, the Rebbe maintains that that's similar to the Pirush of Ramban, Ibn Ezer, Chizkuni, etc. There's only one major Meforish, one major commentary, who goes a different path. Not unusually, it's Rashi. And Rashi, on the surface, seems to take this word in a direction other than its literal meaning, which of course makes us open our mouths in astonishment. Rashi is the master of Pshuta Shel Mikra. He's the one who says, Ani lo basi lefarish ella Pshuta Shel Mikra. I only came to give you the straightforward meaning. Rashi says there's no medrash I'll ever quote that doesn't have a need in Pshuto. If it's not a need in Pshuto Shel Mikra, I'm not going to quote that medrash. Ramban includes all kinds of colorful things, including mystical interpretations. Not in Rashi. Alluded to sometimes, but straightforward Rashi is Pshat. What does Rashi say? Rashi says, Tamim tia im Hashem alikecha. Rashi actually says three different things here. Number one, he says, Hishalach imay b'tmimus. Walk with tmimus. Doesn't explain what tmimus means here. It says, Tamim tia means walk. Maybe walk with innocence, but walk with innocence. Walk with simplicity. Walk with sincerity that's wholehearted. And as the Rebbe once explained, this refers to the practical command. Walk with this. Go forward in life with this. And now Rashi says, what does it mean? It means titzap eloi. It means that your hope should be towards Hashem. Hope to Hashem. Don't hope to a foreign spirit, a shaman. Don't place your trust or your hope in anything else. Only place your trust in Hashem. So number one, walk right. Walk upright with Hashem. Walk with sincerity. Place your trust in Hashem. And number three, Rashi says, Va'al tachkar achkar hasidus. Don't visit the tarot card reader, Ouija board shaker, palm analyst, crystal ball gazer. Don't go to all that. If it comes to you, you accept it wholeheartedly. Whatever God gives me, va'oz tiya imay, then you'll be with God. So tamim tiya, if you'll be tamim, then you'll be im Hashem alikecha. In other words, Rashi doesn't say you should be perfect in your performance of mitzvahs. He says that you should have sincerity and you should have wholesomeness in your attitude towards God. It doesn't speak about the mind. He really seems to be speaking about the heart. Wholehearted with God. So the Rebbe famously asks the question, why does Rashi go away from the literal meaning? And the Rebbe's response to the question is that Rashi's Pshuta Shel Mikra does not only focus on the words he's commenting on, it doesn't only focus on the verse he's commenting on, but also on the broader syntax. This verse does not show up in isolation. This is the conclusion of the fourth reading. It is the conclusion of a number of verses. Verses that speak about the prohibition of involving ourselves in different forms of spirituality. Like, for example, verse 9 that says, you're coming to a land, the people are steeped in immorality and foreign spirituality. Don't learn. Don't do those abominable things. Do not go to those who pass your children through the fire, which was the famous spiritual pursuit of the day. Don't go to Kaisim Ksamim, Uma'inen. Don't go to the people who are charmers. Don't go to the people who tell you about exact times to do one thing or the other, or the power of different zodiac. Don't do that. Don't go to Menachesh or Mechashef. Don't go to people who are saying abracadabra and with incantations don't go. The snake charmers and people who are using mediums, don't go. The Shalamesim seeking to contact the dead and speak with spirits. All of this is abominable. That's why God booted the people who lived in Canaan to begin with. Rather, you should be tamim tiyeh. You should be tamim tiyeh. In other words, this verse comes as a continuation of the previous verses. So if the previous verses are speaking about foreign spirituality, looking for other gods, looking for other spirits, and God's telling you, don't do that, instead you should be tamim tiyeh, you should be wholehearted with God alone, it has to come as a continuation. So it can't just be, you should do mitzvahs right. It's not talking about generally mitzvahs. It's talking about something specific. Why would a person look to an alien form of spirituality? Why would a person look to another god? Why would a person worship or want to get guidance from any of these different practitioners? Because they don't trust God. It's lack of faith. I believe in God, but as one well-intentioned individual once told me, I came to visit him. His daughter was very sick in the hospital. And he's a very well-intentioned person, very sweet guy, but confused, misguided. He says to me, now I feel safe. I said, why? He says, there was a priest that was here an hour ago. Now you're here. I said, what's with you? Ve'ezmir. But you worship multiple gods. You have your feet in multiple. He said, I'm just covering my bases. I said, covering bases? If you believe in the Rebbeinu Shalom, that it's an absolute thing. Chas v'sholom. What are you doing? You can't do that. He was well-meaning. He didn't even think twice. He was missing in his tamim tiyeh. But tamim tiyeh means whatever Hashem says. So Rashi is telling us about not wholehearted or whole-mindedness, being mature in your attitudes. It's not about doing mitzvahs right. It's about the heart, accepting in the heart. And then Rashi says, then you'll be imay, then you'll be with Hashem. So I would like to maybe humbly suggest that Rashi probably doesn't talk about Yehi libi samim b'chukecha because he already explained this in Chumash Devarim. And he never explains it, doesn't comment earlier because over there it doesn't require any commentary. Noach was perfect, okay. Avram was going to become perfect, got that. The animal has to be unblemished, okay. But here, what does perfection have to do with not listening to idols? There's a lot of things you're not allowed to do. Things you shouldn't eat, places you shouldn't go. Why is it specifically the idols you shouldn't seek out? Because this is not about perfection. This is specific to having yourself drawn emotionally. And that's really what people get involved in this. It's emotional. It touches their heartstrings. So here then, Rashi says, Yehi libi samim. Here it's clear that it's speaking about emotions. It's very clear. And the Medrash talk to us, it means when I'm following a chukah, a statute, with this chok is something I have to accept, not just cerebrally. I have to accept it emotionally. That I'm doing this because Hashem said to do it. So David HaMelech says that's when I won't be embarrassed. When my service to Hashem won't be disingenuous. Yeveshu Zaydim, they'll be embarrassed. Even when they did sins, they did them disingenuously. They were using deceit. They weren't even honest with themselves. They were maligning me for things I never even did. But David HaMelech says, I seek to have full integrity, full sincerity, full wholeheartedness in my service to Hashem. And where do you find that? You find that in the chukim. Because in the other areas, you don't have your heart saying to you, what are you doing? But here when it doesn't make sense. Here when people might be mocking or laughing at you. And here it's possible for a person to convince himself that he's doing it for one reason or the other, which is disingenuous, which lacks sincerity. And David HaMelech says, that would be an embarrassment for me. It seems that David HaMelech's response to the dishonesty of his detractors is to seek the fullest honesty of himself. And he says, then I won't be embarrassed. In other words, I'm not going to be embarrassed if I'm not like them. That's not good enough. They should be embarrassed who they are. I, on the other hand, seek perfection, but the kind of perfection that's about wholeheartedness and sincerity. If this is correct, so maybe this is really what the Medrash is alluding to, and that would explain to us what the Metzudas David meant when he said, Tomim bekavana hagoyna, the right intentions. Right intentions, and that's what the Malbim adds. He talks about this idea, the Malbim says, of serving Hashem in a manner which is Tomim be'emuna. That's exactly what Rashi is talking about. Tomim be'emuna. I should be whole in my faith. Because I'm whole in my faith, I'll never be embarrassed of mitzvahs that don't make sense. It doesn't make a difference to me because I'm whole in my faith here. I'm serving Hashem with perfect faith. And this kind of faith-based sincerity that David HaMelech sought was Laman Le'evish. Because really and truly, David HaMelech said, if I serve Hashem with anything less than wholehearted faith, I'm embarrassed of that. That'll be a shame for me. They'll be embarrassed with their lies and cheating. I'll only not be embarrassed when I adhere to the highest level of personal honesty and integrity, which also incorporates a wholehearted and 100% sincere approach to the faith and faithful acceptance of Hashem's mitzvahs, including those I can't understand at all. And this is how David HaMelech completes the verses of Yud, which is all about, as we said, perhaps the Yud represents the Pintele Yid, represents the dot of Jewishness, which is interesting because we have the Teres Chesed who's saying that we're talking here that about the gestalt, the godly gestalt that everybody has, the Tzelem Elikim. And David HaMelech says, I want to maintain my Tzelem Elikim, I want to maintain my neshama, keep my neshama, my Pintele Yid in perfect working order, and then Le'evish. And then, my friends, we will not be ashamed or embarrassed. David HaMelech certainly sets a very high bar for what's not to be embarrassed. And we should yearn for this. We should yearn to emulate David HaMelech. We should yearn not only not to be lying and cheating, not only not to just be disingenuous in our Vedas Hashem, but to serve Hashem with perfect faith, to nurture and to maintain the natural faith, the Tzelem Elikim that we were endowed with to begin with, to recapture and to, in a sense, reclaim the innocence that we were born with, and to serve Hashem in that kind of wholehearted fashion, and then Le'evish will have nothing to be ashamed or embarrassed of. Easy to talk about.
Yeah, tough.
Okay, so now we have marching orders.
I've got a book called The Garden of Emunah by Rabbi Arush. And
I've heard of it.
It says a lot of this as well.